Thank you for tuning into Literary Blend, a publishing podcast. I'm your host, Demi Michelle Schwartz. There's no perfect recipe for chasing a dream in the publishing industry, but I hope the conversations on this show give you the ingredients you need to bake yours into reality. So let's flip the page and get into this chapter of Literary Blend. Hello, friends. Welcome back to Literary Blend. Today's chapter is called Breathing Life Back into the Author Dream. And joining me on the show to cover this topic is one of my author friends and one of my agency cousins. Please welcome Katie Brown. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Tammy. How are you
I'm
doing?
fantastic. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
I'm so excited to have you on the show today. You actually suggested this topic, and it's a fantastic one. But before we dive into our conversation, I would love for you to share a little about yourself and your journey as an author so far.
All right, so I am a young adult fantasy and middle grade horror writer. I'm a 2022 Pitch Me finalist and 2023 Write Mentor Mentee, and a member of the YA and middle grade hubs. My agent and I are currently on submission with my first middle grade project. I live in Canada's beautiful West Coast with my incredibly supportive husband, my equally imaginative son, and a cuddly cat. So when I'm not writing, I am also working as a nurse.
I love that so much. Congratulations on being
Thank
on
you.
submission and having a fabulous agent. And
Yeah, and to you too.
yeah, you too. And just really curious. So, middle grade horror and young adult fantasy, what drew you to those two genres?
You can't get much different, can you? So honestly, with the young adult fantasy, that's where I first started out writing, and it was like this instantaneous spark of an idea that I had, and I started writing, and I couldn't stop writing. And about 4.5 books later, I did eventually take a pause. But for middle grade horror, my husband actually drew me to the genre. He started reading a few books in the genre, and he says, "You know what? I think you should really start reading some of these." And I did. He's a huge horror movie fan, and so he inspired me to try writing. And yeah, the first book that I wrote is currently on sub with my agent right now.
That is so cool. I love how you do both. I do young adult fantasy and thriller, but they're both young adult, so I don't do two different genres plus two different age categories. Do you find it easier or harder to write middle grade or young adult, or is it pretty much the same?
I'm incredibly lucky in that both of the two of the books that I wrote had characters where I connected with them immediately and I was able to find their voice. But yeah, middle grade, the voices can be very different from YA. YA can be a little bit more angsty and a little bit more grown up, whereas middle grade is you have to really monitor what you write and go for the age that you are targeting and find that very special voice.
Yeah, absolutely. I've written some middle grade for short stories. That would be an anthology, so I've
Yeah.
tried middle grade, but I definitely have a natural YA voice to where whenever I'm writing middle grade or another short story I wrote is like the protagonist is 18, so I guess you can say it's like new adult, like dark fantasy or YA crossover. So I had to think a little more on that, but when I write YA, that's just like my natural. But I think it's good as authors to try different genres, try different, age categories, because it just helps us grow as writers if we try new things.
It really does. Yeah, it's fun to remember that time of life and to relive it.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome. So let's dive into our chat. So first, I'm curious, how would you define the author dream?
Oh, I think for everyone that can be a little bit different. For me, I always dreamed of finding my books on the shelf of the bookstores that I'd wander into, um, reaching those kids that, like myself, were reluctant readers growing up, never being able to find a book that they could connect with. And if I can find one kid that can pick up a book and enjoy it, that is the author dream to me.
Absolutely. And I love how you said that it can be different for everyone. And I think that's one of the biggest first points to highlight because I think that your dream could be simply holding your book in your hands. It could be seeing it on a bookshelf at Barnes and Noble. It could be hitting number one on the New York Times bestseller list. Like there's so many different dreams, and we can have more than one. But I think for me, the biggest thing is my dream is to literally have a deal and one day be able to hold my book in my hands. And
Mhm.
that's one of them, but also, I think it's really special when a reader goes to the author and says, "I connected with your character," or "This book
Yeah.
really helped me through a certain experience," or whatever, and I experienced that with my music. With my music, I'm not trying to be a mainstream top 40 artist. That would be cool, but that's not my goal. My goal is to write music to connect to people or that they can connect with. And when I get messages from people saying, "Oh, I love this song because it really made me feel this way," or it made me feel seen, or that I'm not alone, like that's the dream for me, that I was able to be there for someone else. And it's the same with my books, like getting the first email from a reader, that would be a dream. And so there are different ones. And I think realizing what those are for you is really important because it's going to help you as you're chasing your dreams and also to adjust your expectations as well. So, in terms of breathing life back into the author dream, there are certain experiences that we can go through as authors that can make us lose sight of our dreams and question if we're even good enough or if we should give up on our dreams. So, for you, what are some things that you've been through that made you question your author goals and wonder if you could even find enjoyment and that passion for your dream again?
The one of the biggest ones for me was when I initially started writing. It was a journey I took a bit with my mom, and she was by my side. She was my biggest support. She was uh, one of my biggest fans that would ever be. And she got sick, and writing kind of took a bit of a hold. And for me, when she passed away, it was a hard thing to go back to the books that were so much a part of um, my life with her. And eventually, for me, the the thing that brought me back to that dream of that and that book was the 3-year anniversary of her death, and it was during the pandemic. I was working as a nurse, and it was a hard time. And I wanted to finish it for her, and that's when I started back. So I picked up the old, dusty old hundreds of pages of scribbled notes and highlights, and I went back to it with the goal of finishing the edits that I'd started at that time, and not knowing what else to go to next. But that was the first step of getting back to it.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank
And I
you.
really appreciate it. Yeah, for sure. And I think that something to take away here is that you started writing and then you took a break for a reason and then you came back to it. And I think a big takeaway here is that if something happens in your life where you need to take a step back, or maybe you're querying and it's just terrible for your mental health and you're losing enjoyment in writing and you just need a break, you can take the breaks because you're a perfect example of you took the break, you came back to it, and now you're agented and on submission. And so I think that is a good idea to remember to see where you are in your life. If you need to take a break, take it, and then come back to it when the time is right for you.
For sure, the query trenches can be really hard on mental health, and it's so important to look out for you and listen to what your needs are during that process as well. It, your book will always be there waiting for you.
Yeah, exactly. And on querying as well, I think the rejections play a big role in making you doubt yourself. At least it did for me. It took me 3 books before I got my agent. And during that process, I constantly was thinking, is this worth it? Am I good enough? And I think one of the things that I try to remember is that my time will come when it's meant to. And I think it's really difficult as queer and authors, especially, to see authors on Twitter sometimes we can see these tweets and think, oh, if I'm not getting a full request 24 hours after submitting, my book's not good. Or if my first book died in the trenches and I have to write another one, I'm not good because there's this other author I know who got an offer on their first manuscript in 2 months. And there can be this whole comparison game, which can really hurt mental health. And for me, especially when I was seeing these tweets in a period of time where I felt like all my friends were getting agents and I wasn't, I was like, am I good enough? Should I quit? Is my dream worth it? And I'm happy I didn't give up and I kept going. But you can definitely experience those thoughts when you're getting rejections and you're seeing other authors get successes that you're working for.
Oh, definitely. It's totally normal to be happy and also feel your own feels at the same time. It is such a journey, and we all have such different ones to take. It's I've seen such beautiful stories on Twitter about people who queried for years on fourth, fifth books, and then eventually the one just clicked and it go went on to sell very quickly, sometimes at auction even. It's Those are the stories that I always love to listen to and read.
Yeah, and I think seeing both sides of the spectrum is it's really inspiring because the ones that get it quickly, they were lucky for sure, but it's an amazing story and it's magical. And then also the ones that did it for years and years and years and years and then got it, it's like that shows true persistence and like not giving up. I was kind of in the middle, but like in hindsight, it didn't take too long. It was like a year and 4 months. But when I was in it, it felt like it was a decade. I was like, "Oh my gosh, like, I have to go again and again and again and again." And just reflecting back too, I like, after I signed and I wasn't querying anymore, I realized how much time I feel like I lost in my life from querying because, I mean, like, revising the books again and again, and then, like, researching the agents, and then filling out the query tracker forms that took forever, and all the things. Like, I feel like I lost so much time, but then I had to remind myself all that time was put toward this dream, and so it wasn't wasted time, even though at the time it felt like I lost all this time.
I know I still find myself sometimes going to the Query Tracker website and going, nope, I don't need to check where the timeline's at. I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah, and honestly too, like, I would see, like, tweets, like MSWL tweets and think, "Oh, my book will fit that," and it's like, "Oh, wait, no, I'm agented, I don't need to look at this anymore." But another point I wanted to make is that something that kept me going while querying and on submission was working on the next thing, because I feel like that's where I was able to breathe life back into my author dream. When I was in the query trenches and now on submission and, getting the passes and getting the hopeful emails and all of that, it can be a roller coaster ride. And by writing a new project, I feel like the stakes are much lower when you're writing something new because it's not something that you need to show to your agent right away, or it's not something that you need to query right away. It's just a project that you're working on for fun to rediscover your love for writing. And when it comes time to pitch it or send it to your agent or whatever, then you can be a little more strategic about like going with the line edits and looking at the story, see if anything needs fixed. But when you're in that enjoyment stage of plotting a new book and drafting a new book and working on it and experiencing the magic of being immersed in a new story, that has honestly, I think, been like the number one thing for me. And obviously, like having my agent support now has helped me stay hopeful. But like writing something new, like, and just being immersed in that story has really helped me remember why I'm doing what I'm doing because I love writing so much.
You couldn't be more right, Demi. I mean, it writing the next thing was what got me my agent and got me to the point that I'm at right now. I was uh, I was querying one of my YA fantasy books, and it was doing all right in in the trenches. But YA fantasy is a really, as you know, tough genre to get into, and there's so many amazing writers out there writing it. I had gotten a full request from an agent and things were going really well. It looked like they were on track to offer. And Meanwhile, I was also writing my new middle grade horror book, and she said that she wanted to set up a phone call, and I was so excited. And I never ended up hearing back from her. And the emotional roller coaster that you go through when that happens is it's hard. You go to some really dark places. You think, oh, I'm not good enough. It's never going to happen. What was I thinking? I told everybody. Now everyone's asking about this. And when's it going to happen? And it didn't. And what do I say? What do I do? How do I keep going? It's a huge thing to go through. And, but writing that middle grade book, finding that voice and finding my enjoyment in writing, that is what brought me back to writing and helped, find my way again in it.
Yeah. I'm so sorry you went through that. I hear so many horror stories. It's like, I can imagine. That would be terrible. But I think this is another point as well with you ended up shelving that project and then you moved on to the middle grade horror. And I think when you shelve a project, it can really hurt. Like, when I was querying my first book, it was a young adult mystery and I loved it. It was my thesis in my MFA program and it needed some work more on the line level more than anything. And I can see why it got rejected. I would love to return to that one eventually. But the second book I queried was a young adult speculative thriller. And I believed in this book so much, and it has some like heavier topics in it. And I realized like when I was querying that there were less agents I was able to pitch to just because the book had topics that they didn't want to see and things like that. And I felt like it was an important story and nobody wanted to read it. And so when I was querying, it was hard. I got a couple requests, but nothing. It actually got an R&R as well, which was nice, but ultimately, like, that one died, and my young adult fantasy is what got me my agent, but what's been really great is, like, I sent the thriller to my agent, and she sent it to her assistant, I got notes from her assistant, and then I'm currently revising it right now, and it's been, like, so great to, like, go back to a book I love so much that I thought would never be read again by anyone and, like, revise it again, and my agent will be reading it soon, so it's, like,
That's
really
so wonderful.
exciting. Yeah, so even if you shelve a project, it doesn't mean it's dead forever.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah, it's just there waiting for the right time in your career and in your life to go back to it.
Right, and I think the right time thing applies to everything in publishing. I think, like we said before, about looking at others' journeys and comparing ourselves, and it can be with our own books as well. We can write a book that's just not right for the market right now, but in 5 years, it's what editors want. And so I think a big thing with the author dream is just remembering why you love to do what you do. Keep writing those books, and if one isn't successful at a certain period of time, you can always return to it in the future.
Yeah, like I hear Dystopia is coming back and I
I know,
couldn't
I'm
be more
so
excited.
excited. I could totally see myself writing dystopian, like, I think it'd be fun, like, I love like, growing up, like, middle school, like, Hunger Games,
Oh
Divergent,
yeah,
like, oh, yes, please, let's get them all back.
such a good time in YA. I loved all those books.
I know, me too, and that's a perfect example, like, I'm sure there are authors out there who wrote dystopian novels and there were all those rejections, like, "Not right for the market, not right for the market," and now everyone's probably scrambling like, "OMG, I'm dusting off the cobwebs, let's go."
Yeah, for sure.
So, for any authors out there who are really struggling to breathe life back into their author dreams right now, what advice would you give them?
So I would say, take your time. If you need to take a breath from it, do that. Take a step away. It's always going to be there, waiting for you. There's no rush to get it done. If you need to work on something else that maybe speaks to your imagination more, then go right ahead and do that. Don't be afraid to take a pause on a project and try something different.
For sure. And this also goes for like writing in a genre or an age category you haven't before. like you shifted, I shifted. I wrote three different genres basically, even though mystery and thriller are similar, they are different. But I explored three different genres, and when I write short stories, I write across genres too, ones that I don't focus on in my full length books. And so I think as well, like if you have been writing middle grade horror for like years and years and years and years, and you're just like maybe getting bored with it, and like you're like, I can't think of any more good ideas, and maybe you've been reading lots of, I don't know, adult thriller lately, and you're like, I would want to try that. I mean, sometimes just trying something new is all it takes to find enjoyment again, and also to discover something that you never thought you would like. Like, I didn't read much fantasy growing up. I was huge with mysteries and thrillers. That's basically all I read. And then when I was in college, I started reading a little bit more fantasy. And then when I was in my MFA program, I had quite a few critique partners who wrote fantasy. And getting the opportunity to critique fantasy manuscripts, I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like, maybe I'll write one. And then for NaNoWriMo the one year, I was like, just for kicks, I'm going to write a fairy tale reimagining, like, just for fun. Like, this is just for fun. And then, like, now I love fantasy, and that's the book that got me my agent. And so it wasn't a situation where I, like, didn't love writing anymore, was, like, bored or anything like that. It was just I wanted something fresh. I wanted something new. And I tried that. And so I think shifting genres or age categories can be a really great way as well.
Oh, for sure. That's the one really neat thing about writing is there's just so many different genres and so many different vibes and characters to explore that it trying to changing it up and trying something new is such a good way to help you find your way in writing.
For sure, absolutely. And just to wrap up, I wanted to restate a point that we mentioned at the beginning, which is defining what your dream is. I think knowing what you want and what you're shooting for can really help you to take the necessary steps to get there. So if you want to be traditionally published and you want to have your book on the bookshelf and a chance at hitting the bestseller list, then you know the steps that you need to take to get in that position. If you just want to have your book in your hands and you know your personality doesn't lend itself to traditional publishing, maybe looking at independent publishing or going with a small press. Like, I have so many author friends who are published through small presses, Wild Ink being one of them. So lovely and just amazing family oriented kind of community. And so there are a lot of different avenues to be published, and there are a lot of different goals and dreams that authors have for their stories. And so knowing what yours are will really help you to focus on what steps you need to take. And then as you're taking those strategic steps in whatever direction you're going toward, just remembering why you love writing, and anytime you feel like you are losing sight of your dream, to take a step back, reflect on what's making you feel the way that you're feeling, and just do everything possible to reconnect with the art, because that's what you're doing in the first place. You're writing books because you love it, and so returning to that love for writing whenever possible when you're losing sight of your dreams is the way to go.
For sure, and also recognizing it's okay for dreams to change along the way as well. It happens. We all grow with life and change in life, and that's a totally a good thing to reassess those dreams and remember why you're in writing.
For sure, absolutely. Well, Katie, it was a joy having you on the show for this fabulous and inspiring conversation. Before we go, we have to do your plot twist. Are you
Oh no,
ready?
no.
Yours is fun. Don't worry. Okay. So, if you were an agent, what are five things that would definitely be on your manuscript wish list?
Oh, that is such a good question. Oh my goodness, I love that question. So for sure, middle grade. I've fallen in love with middle grade voice and middle grade, just the themes of it. It's so beautiful. Those stories of friendship, they're so important to tell in the world. So middle grade. Do you want like genres, or would you like
You can
just
do genres or like specific elements, whatever.
yeah, I well, my husband has definitely converted me to be a horror fan. So horror would be on my wish list. Um, I will always have a love for YA fantasy. It is what brought me to writing. Um,
Two more.
Two more. Oh, well, because my son is starting to learn to read and enjoy reading, which has been such a joy to watch. Something along the lines of Diary of a Wimpy Kid. They are some of his favorite books, so we love that. That would definitely be an MSWL for me. And last but not least, ooh, well, because it's making a comeback, let's say dystopian.
Perfect. That's so fun.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And before we wrap up for good, can you please share with everybody where they can connect with you online?
Yeah, I am on Twitter at author Kate Brown.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much again for joining me on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Demi.
Absolutely. And listeners, that is a wrap on this chapter with Katie, all about breathing life back into the author dream. If you enjoyed our conversation, please consider leaving Literary Blend a review and giving it 5 stars to help others just like you discover it. Also, if you have friends in the publishing industry you think would enjoy the show, please pass it along to them. Thank you for listening, and until we flip to the next chapter, happy reading and writing.